The stars had never seemed so cold. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the observation window of the ISS Prometheus, watching the alien fleet hang in the darkness like a swarm of silver insects. There were 50 ships out there, 50 vessels from a civilization that had ruled the galaxy for 40,000 years, and they had come for Earth 3 days ago. Humanity had celebrated its greatest achievement. The first colony ships had reached Alpha Centauri. Children were being born on distant worlds. Mankind had finally spread beyond its cradle. They thought they were alone in the universe. They were wrong. The Zorvathi Imperium had watched humanity's clumsy first steps into space with amusement. For centuries, they had monitored Earth's radio signals, laughing at the primitive species that still fought wars over land and resources. When humans finally built ships that could cross the void between stars, the Imperium decided it was time to collect their newest subjects. High Archon Vatris Kotan stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. He was tall, even for a Zorvathi, with scales the color of burnished copper and eyes like molten gold. His people had conquered over 600 species. They had crushed civilizations that had existed for millions of years. These humans, with their fragile bodies and short lifespans, would kneel like all the others. He adjusted his ceremonial armor and smiled. This would be easy. The diplomatic shuttle crossed the void between the fleets. Elena watched it approach through the window, her heart beating fast in her chest. She had spent 20 years as a diplomat, negotiating peace treaties and trade agreements across Earth. Nothing had prepared her for this. The Zorvathi delegation entered the meeting chamber with the confidence of gods. Descending to speak with insects, Vatris walked at their head, his clawed feet clicking against the metal floor. Behind him came his advisors, each one decorated with medals and honors from 1,000 conquered worlds. Elena stepped forward and extended her hand. It was a human gesture of greeting, one she knew the aliens would not understand. But she refused to bow, not yet. Not ever, if she could help it. Vatris looked at her hand with something like curiosity. Then he laughed. The sound echoed through the chamber like breaking glass. "You are brave," he said. His voice was deep and cold, filtered through a translation device that hung around his neck. Brave and foolish. But that is common among primitive species. Elena lowered her hand. Her face remained calm, but inside, anger burned like fire. "We are not primitive," she said. "We have crossed the stars. We have built cities on other worlds. We are humanity, and we deserve respect." Vatris waved his clawed hand dismissively. "You have taken your first steps. Nothing more. The Imperium walked among the stars when your ancestors were still climbing trees." He gestured to one of his advisors, who stepped forward with a glowing tablet. "We have come to offer you a gift. The Benevolent Integration Treaty." Elena took the tablet. She read through the document, and with each line, her blood grew colder. Humanity would surrender all territory, all technology, all weapons. In exchange, the Imperium would provide protection and guidance. Earth would become a farming world, producing food for Zorvathi colonies. Humans would serve as laborers, servants, and entertainment for their new masters. It was not a treaty. It was a death sentence for everything humanity had ever been. "No," Elena said. The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Vatris blinked, his golden eyes narrowing. Around him, his advisors shifted uncomfortably. No species had ever refused. "I do not think you understand," Vatris said slowly, as if speaking to a child. "This is not a negotiation. You will sign the treaty, or we will reduce your planet to ash. We have done it before." Many times, Elena looked at him. She thought of her children back on Earth, of her parents, of the billions of people who had no idea that their fate was being decided in this cold metal room. She thought of every war humanity had ever fought, every tyrant they had overthrown, every time they had refused to surrender. "No," she said again. "Humanity will not kneel." For a long moment, Vatris stared at her. Then he laughed again, louder this time. His advisors joined him, their alien voices creating a horrible chorus. "Delightful," Vatris said. "Truly delightful. I have not been refused in 300 years. It is almost refreshing." He leaned forward, bringing his face close to Elena's. His breath smelled of copper and something else, something ancient and terrible. "You have one of your solar rotations. One day, in your primitive counting. Submit or die. The choice is yours. The Zorvathi delegation turned and walked out. Elena watched them go, her hands shaking at her sides. She had just condemned her species to war against an enemy they could not hope to defeat. Or so the Zorvathi believed. Back on Earth, the United Terran Council met in emergency session. Leaders from every nation gathered in the great chamber beneath the Swiss Alps, their faces pale with fear. General Marcus Chen stood before them, a man of 60 years with gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. The Zorvathi have given us one day, he said. They expect us to surrender. They expect us to be afraid. He paused, looking around the room. They do not know us. He touched a control on his wrist, and a holographic display appeared above the council table. It showed blueprints, weapons systems, defense networks, things that officially did not exist. For 50 years, we have prepared for this moment, Chen continued. Since the first signals from space, we have known that we were not alone, and we knew that whoever found us might not come in peace. He gestured at the display. Project Prometheus, our insurance policy, our hidden strength. The council members stared at the plans. Some gasped, others smiled grimly. The Zorvathi think we are primitive, Chen said. They think we will kneel because we are afraid to die. They are wrong. He clenched his fist. We are humanity. We have survived ice ages and plagues and wars that nearly destroyed us. We have crawled out of every darkness that ever threatened to consume us. And we will not bow to these arrogant invaders. He looked up at the display, at the weapons that would change everything. They have no idea what is coming, far above Earth. High Archon-Vatras sat on his throne and waited. He was patient. He was confident. He had conquered hundreds of worlds, and he would conquer this one too. He did not know that he had just made the greatest mistake of his long life. The stars watched in silence. They had seen empires rise and fall before. They knew that pride always came before destruction, and humanity was about to teach the Zorvathi a lesson they would never forget. 1 week passed. Earth did not surrender. High Archon-Vatras received the news with cold anger. He had expected the humans to realize their mistake. He had expected them to beg for mercy. Instead, they had used the time to strengthen their defenses and move their people to safety. It did not matter. Defenses could be broken. People could be found. Send the subjugation fleet, Vatras ordered. 200 ships. Standard protocol. His officers bowed and hurried to obey. Some of them smiled as they worked. This assignment was beneath them, really. 200 warships to crush a species that had barely learned to fly. It was like using a hammer to kill an ant. Fleet Commander Rivath took command of the operation. He was young for a Zorvathi officer, only 400 years old, and eager to prove himself. This mission would be easy. He would burn a few cities, kill a few million humans, and the rest would fall in line. They always did. The subjugation fleet jumped into the inner solar system, with weapons charged and shields down. There was no need for shields. What could humans possibly do to hurt them? Rivath looked at the tactical display with boredom. Earth hung before him like a blue jewel, surrounded by primitive satellites and a handful of small space stations. His sensors detected a defense grid of some kind, but it was laughable. Kinetic weapons, chemical rockets, technology that the Zorvathi had abandoned 10,000 years ago. Should we raise shields? Commander, one of his officers asked. Rivath waved his hand dismissively. Why bother? Let them fire their little weapons. Let them see how useless their resistance is. It will make the surrender sweeter. The fleet advanced. 200 silver warships moved toward Earth in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming in the sunlight. Behind them, the darkness of space seemed to hold its breath. On the bridge of the human command ship Defiance, General Marcus Chen watched them come. His face was calm, but his heart was racing. Everything depended on the next few minutes. Are all systems ready? He asked quietly. Yes, sir, his tactical officer replied. Prometheus network is online. Stealth destroyers are in position. All stations report green. Chen nodded. He looked at the enemy fleet on his display, at the 200 ships that had come to enslave his species. The Zorvathi thought this would be easy. They thought humanity was weak. They were about to learn the truth. All units. Chen said into his communicator. Execute Protocol Omega. Make them remember this day forever. The trap sprung. From the asteroid belt, from hidden bases on moons, from ships that had been drifting silent and dark in the void, humanity's real weapons emerged. Kinetic accelerators hidden in hollowed-out asteroids opened fire. Tungsten rods the size of buildings screamed through space at nearly a third of the speed of light. The first Zorvathi ship exploded before anyone knew what was happening. Then the second, then the third, then 10 more. Ryvath stared at his display in shock. Red lights flashed everywhere. Ships were dying. Shields were activating too late. His fleet was being torn apart. What is happening? He screamed. Where is the attack coming from? Everywhere, Commander. His officer shouted back. They have weapons everywhere. Hidden weapons. We did not detect. Another impact shook the ship. Alarms wailed. The lights flickered. From the shadows of Saturn's rings, human stealth destroyers emerged. They were small ships, built for speed and silence, armed with antimatter warheads. They struck the Zorvathi fleet from behind, hitting engine sections and weapons rays. The Zorvathi tried to fight back. Their energy weapons were powerful. Their ships were fast, but they had been caught completely by surprise. They did not know where to aim. They did not know how many enemies they faced. And every second, more of them died. Ryvath watched his fleet crumble. 100 ships gone. 150. His own vessel was damaged, leaking atmosphere from a dozen wounds. Around him, his officers were screaming orders, trying to organize a defense that was already too late. Retreat. Ryvath finally ordered. All ships, retreat. Jump to safe distance. The surviving Zorvathi ships turned and fled. Their engines burned bright as they ran from the system, leaving behind the wreckage of 187 destroyed vessels. 11 minutes. The battle had lasted 11 minutes, and humanity had won. On Earth, people poured into the streets, cheering and crying and hugging each other. They had done the impossible. They had defeated the invincible Zorvathi, but General Chen did not celebrate. He stood on the bridge of the Defiance, staring at the debris field where enemy ships had died. He knew this was only the beginning. They will come back, he said quietly. And next time, they will bring everything they have. Far away, on the Zorvathi throne world, High Archon Vatris received the report of the disaster. He sat in his throne room, surrounded by advisors who were too afraid to speak. The data played on a holographic display before him, showing ship after ship exploding, showing the greatest military embarrassment the Imperium had suffered in 10,000 years. How? Vatris whispered. The word was barely audible, but it carried the weight of mountains. We do not know, High Archon. One of his advisors said carefully. Their technology was far beyond our estimates. They had weapons hidden throughout their system. They were prepared for us. Prepared. Vatris tasted the word like poison. These primitives, these insects, they were prepared. He stood up slowly. His golden eyes burned with fury. Around the room, his advisors stepped back in fear. They had seen this look before. It meant death was coming. They humiliated us, Vatris said. Before the entire galaxy, these humans made fools of the Imperium. They killed our warriors. They destroyed our ships. He grabbed the datapad showing the battle report and crushed it in his clawed hand. This cannot stand. What do you command, High Archon? His military advisor asked. Vatris smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a predator who had been bitten by its prey, and now intended to tear that prey apart piece by piece, mobilize the full Imperial Armada. He said, every ship, every warrior, every weapon we possess. I want 40,000 vessels ready to move within 3 months. His advisors gasped. The full armada had not been assembled in over 2,000 years. It was enough firepower to crack planets, to burn entire solar systems, to end civilizations forever. High Archon, one brave advisor ventured. Is that not excessive? They are only humans. Vatris turned to look at him. The advisor fell silent immediately. They made a fool of me, Vatris said softly. They made a fool of the Imperium. I will grind their world to dust. I will enslave every last one of them, and I will make sure that no species ever dares to resist us again. He sat back down on his throne. This is personal now. He did not know it, but he had just made his second mistake. His first was underestimating humanity. His second was letting his pride make decisions for him. In the silence of space, humanity prepared for what was coming. They had won the first battle, but the war had only just begun. And the Zorvathi were bringing everything they had. 3 months passed like a held breath. Humanity used every second. Colony ships evacuated civilians to hidden stations deep in the asteroid belt. Factories worked day and night, building weapons, building ships, building hope. Scientists in underground bunkers pushed Project Prometheus toward completion. And then the day came. General Marcus Chen stood on the bridge of the Defiance and watched the edge of the solar system. His sensors had detected the enemy fleet an hour ago. Now he could see them with his own eyes, and the sight made his blood run cold. 40,000 ships. They filled the darkness like a river of stars, each one gleaming with weapons and armor. At their center flew the Eternal Dominion, the massive flagship of High Archon Vatrus himself. It was larger than a city, bristling with weapons that could crack moons. The entire military might of the Zorvathi Imperium had come to Earth. Nothing like this had been seen in 10,000 years. Dear God, whispered Captain Sarah Cole, Chen's second in command. There are so many of them. Chen said nothing. He had known this was coming. He had prepared for it. But seeing it was different from knowing. How many ships do we have? He asked quietly. 300 combat-ready vessels, Cole replied. Another 200 support ships, plus the defense network. 500 ships against 40,000. It was not a battle. It was an execution. But humanity had not survived this long by accepting impossible odds. High Archon Vatrus watched the human solar system from his throne room. Victory was so close he could taste it. This time, there would be no mistakes. This time, he had brought enough firepower to burn every planet in the system. Begin the advance. He ordered. Destroy everything. Leave nothing standing. The Zorvathi Armada moved forward like a wave of death. Their formation was perfect. Their shields were raised. Their weapons were charged. They had learned from the first battle. They would not be caught by surprise again. The siege of Sol began. Human defense stations opened fire first. Kinetic rounds and missiles streaked through the void, exploding against Zorvathi shields. Some ships died, but for every one that fell, 100 more kept coming. Chen ordered his fleet to engage. Human destroyers and cruisers darted between asteroids, striking at the enemy flanks. They fought with courage and skill, taking down 10 times their number. But it was not enough. It could never be enough. Day by day, the Zorvathi advanced. Humanity's outer colonies fell first. Mining stations on distant moons were reduced to rubble. The great shipyards of Jupiter burned. Mars was bombarded from orbit, its surface scarred by weapons fire. On Earth, billions of people watched the sky and prayed. They could see the flashes of battle, distant lights that meant their defenders were dying. Vatrus savored every victory. He broadcast the destruction across the galaxy, showing all other species what happened to those who defied the Imperium. Let them watch, he thought. Let them remember. The humans fight well, his military advisor admitted. Better than expected. They have already destroyed over 3,000 of our ships, 3,000 out of 40,000. Vatrus replied dismissively. They are delaying the inevitable, nothing more. Soon they will have nothing left. He was right. Humanity was losing. The lunar bases fell next. Chen ordered a retreat, pulling his remaining ships back to Earth's orbit. He had started with 500 vessels. Now he had less than 100. Sir, Captain Cole said, her voice tight with exhaustion. We cannot hold much longer. The enemy will reach Earth within 48 hours. Chen nodded slowly. He had hoped for more time. He had hoped for a miracle. But sometimes you had to make your own miracles. Is Prometheus ready? He asked. Cole checked her console. The scientists say they need 12 more hours. They have 6, Chen replied. Tell them to work faster. The next hours were the longest of humanity's existence. The Zorvathi fleet closed in around Earth like a fist. Vatrus positioned his flagship directly above the planet, looking down at the blue world he was about to destroy, humans of Earth. He broadcast on all frequencies. Your resistance has been impressive. Futile, but impressive. I give you one final chance to surrender. Kneel before the Imperium and some of you may be allowed to live as servants. Refuse, and I will burn your world until nothing remains but ash on the bridge of the Defiance." Chen listened to the message. Around him, his crew waited in silence. They were exhausted, wounded, afraid, but none of them wanted to surrender. "Sir," Cole said quietly, "Prometheus is ready." Chen closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, they were filled with determination. "All ships, this is General Chen. Fall back to minimum safe distance from Earth. Do not engage the enemy. I repeat, do not engage." He took a deep breath. "It is time to show these invaders what humanity can really do." Deep beneath Earth's surface, in a bunker that officially did not exist, scientists activated the most powerful weapon ever created by human hands. It was not a bomb. It was not a beam. It was something far more terrible. Project Prometheus was a device that manipulated the fabric of space itself. The generators hummed to life. Energy levels climbed beyond anything the scientists had ever measured. Above them, space began to shimmer and twist. Vatris noticed the anomaly first. His sensors screamed warnings that made no sense. Something was happening to space around the solar system. Something impossible. "What is this?" he demanded. "What are they doing?" No one could answer him. No one understood. And then the barrier appeared. It erupted from the sun itself, spreading outward at the speed of light. A wall of warped spacetime that surrounded the entire solar system. It was invisible to the eye but absolute to sensors. In one moment, 40,000 Zorvathi ships were trapped inside a cage of bent reality. Vatris tried to order his ships to escape. It was too late. The barrier was complete. Inside the trapped zone, the rules of physics changed. Faster than light travel became impossible. Communications to the outside galaxy were severed. The Zorvathi armada was cut off from everything, alone in enemy territory. Chen watched the barrier form with tears in his eyes. They had done it. They had actually done it. He opened a channel to the enemy flagship. "High Archon Vatris," he said calmly. "You came to our home to conquer us. You brought your entire fleet, everything your empire had. And now that fleet is trapped here, with us on the Eternal Dominion." Vatris stared at the transmission in shock. His officers were shouting, trying to find a way through the barrier, trying to understand what had happened. None of them could believe it. "The hunters have become the hunted," Chen continued. "You thought you were trapping us, but we were trapping you." He smiled grimly. "Welcome to human space, High Archon. You are going to be here for a very long time." The transmission ended. Vatris sat in silence, his golden eyes wide with something he had not felt in 300 years. Fear. Outside his ship, the barrier shimmered in the darkness. Inside it, humanity prepared for the next phase of the war. The siege of Sol was over. The siege of the Zorvathi had begun. The first week inside the barrier was chaos. Zorvathi captains fired their weapons at the shimmering wall of warp space, trying to blast their way through. Nothing worked. Energy beams bent and scattered. Missiles exploded against something that was not quite there. The barrier was not a wall of matter. It was a twist in reality itself. Fighting it was like trying to punch a shadow. High Archon Vatris ordered attack after attack. He refused to believe that primitives had created something his scientists could not understand. There had to be a weakness. There had to be a way out. There was not. As the days passed, the reality of the situation began to sink in. The mighty Zorvathi armada was trapped in a cage of humanity's making. Their supplies were limited. Their communications with the home galaxy were gone. And they were surrounded by an enemy that knew every rock, every moon, every shadow of this solar system. General Chen did not attack immediately. He waited. He watched. He let the fear grow. "They are getting nervous," Captain Cole reported during a strategy meeting. "Their ships are clustering together, trying to protect each other. Some are already running low on certain supplies." Chen nodded. "Good. Let them sweat a little longer. When we strike, I want them scared." The humans had lost most of their fleet in the siege, but they still had their defense networks, their hidden bases, their knowledge of the system. And now they had something else. Time. Every day, human factories produced new ships, new weapons, new drones. Every day, humanity grew stronger while the Zorvathi grew weaker. The first attack came 3 weeks after the barrier activated. A Zorvathi supply convoy was moving through the asteroid belt, escorted by 50 warships. They were carrying food and fuel from captured human stations. Without these supplies, the fleet would begin to starve. The human strike force appeared from nowhere. They had been hiding inside hollowed-out asteroids, powered down, invisible to sensors. 20 small ships against 50 Zorvathi warships. The battle lasted 8 minutes. The humans destroyed the convoy and vanished back into the darkness. Before reinforcements could arrive, Vatris received the report with cold fury. But there was something else in his eyes now. Something that looked almost like doubt. "Find them," he ordered. "Hunt them down. I want every asteroid searched, every moon examined. They cannot hide forever, but they could." And they did. Humanity fought a different kind of war now. Not the grand battles of fleet against fleet, but something smaller and more deadly. Ambushes in the darkness, raids on vulnerable ships, hit-and-run attacks that killed dozens of Zorvathi for every human lost. The psychological warfare was even worse. Human broadcasts played on all Zorvathi frequencies. Day and night, messages in the Zorvathi language, telling them the truth they did not want to hear. Your empire does not know you are trapped. They cannot save you. They cannot even hear you. You came to conquer. You will stay forever. How long until your food runs out? How long until your ships start to fail? We are patient. We can wait. Can you? Morale in the Zorvathi fleet began to crumble. Soldiers who had never known defeat started to whisper about curses and bad omens. Officers argued about strategy while their crews grew hungry and afraid. Some captains began to surrender. They would drift their ships toward human positions, broadcasting messages of peace, begging to be taken prisoner rather than starving in the void. The humans accepted their surrenders. They treated the prisoners fairly. Word spread through the Zorvathi fleet that humans kept their promises. More ships surrendered. Then more. Vatris executed the families of officers who gave up. It did not stop the surrenders. It only made his remaining forces hate him more. For months after the barrier activated, the Zorvathi armada had lost half its strength. 20,000 ships destroyed, captured, or simply abandoned by crews who had lost all hope. The survivors huddled together in a defensive formation round the Eternal Dominion, too afraid to venture out. General Chen looked at the tactical display and allowed himself a small smile. They were winning. Against all odds, against the greatest military force in the galaxy, humanity was winning. "It is time to end this," he said. The human fleet had grown during the months of guerrilla warfare. New ships built in secret factories. Captured Zorvathi vessels repaired and turned against their former masters. Volunteers from Earth who had trained day and night for this moment. 300 human warships assembled in formation. It was not a large number, but it was enough. Chen broadcast a message to the Zorvathi flagship. "High Archon Vatris, your fleet is broken. Your supplies are gone. Your soldiers are surrendering faster than you can execute them. You have lost." He paused, letting the words sink in. "I am offering you terms. Withdraw all claims to human space. Release the records of every species you have conquered, so their histories will not be forgotten, and declare that Earth space is permanently restricted to all Zorvathi forces." On the Eternal Dominion, Vatris listened to the message in his darkened throne room. Around him, the ship felt empty. Half his officers had died. The other half had lost faith in victory. His military advisor approached carefully. "High Archon, perhaps we should consider—" "No." The word was quiet but absolute. "I will not kneel to primitives. I will not surrender to insects who should be serving me, not defeating me. But High Archon, if we do not—" I said no. Vatris rose from his throne, his golden eyes blazing. "I am the High Archon of the Zorvathi Imperium. I have ruled for 300 years. I have conquered 100 worlds. I will not let my legacy end with surrender to humans." The advisor fell silent. There was nothing more to say. Vatris opened a channel to the human fleet. "General Chen," he said coldly, "I reject your terms. If you want victory, you will have to take it from my dead hands." Chen sighed. He had expected this. Pride was a terrible thing, especially when it had nothing left to protect. "So be it," he replied. The final battle began. human ships surged forward, supported by waves of drones and automated weapons platforms. The remaining Zorvathi forces fought back with desperate fury, but they were outnumbered now. Outnumbered and outmaneuvered in a system that humanity knew like the back of their hand. Ship after ship fell. The Zorvathi formation crumbled. Captains who had refused to surrender before now broadcast pleas for mercy. As human weapons locked onto their vessels, Chen granted them mercy. Every ship that surrendered was spared. Every crew that gave up was treated with dignity. He wanted the survivors to remember this. He wanted them to tell others what they had seen. The battle reached the Eternal Dominion itself. Human boarding craft attached to the massive flagship's hull. Marines in powered armor cut through airlocks and fought their way inside. The corridors of the great ship became a battlefield, with Zorvathi soldiers defending their lord to the death. General Chen did not lead the assault personally. He was too important to risk, but he watched through camera feeds as his people pushed deeper and deeper into the enemy vessel, toward the throne room, toward the end. Inside the Eternal Dominion, Vatrus listened to the sounds of battle growing closer. His guards had fallen. His officers had fled or died. He was alone now, sitting on his throne, waiting for the inevitable. The doors burst open. Human Marines poured in, their weapons raised. Vatrus stood slowly. He was old, even for a Zorvathi. Old and tired and full of pride that would not let him bend. "I am High Archon Vatrus Khotan," he said calmly. "I will not surrender." The Marine commander looked at him with something that might have been pity. "I know," she said. Vatrus raised his ceremonial blade. The weapon that had killed 1,000 enemies. A plasma round took him through the chest. He fell back onto his throne, golden eyes staring at nothing. The last breath escaped his lips as a whisper that no one could hear. The High Archon was dead. The war was over. And humanity had won. The barrier fell 3 days after the war ended. General Chen gave the order himself, watching from the bridge of the Defiance as the shimmering wall of warp space dissolved into nothing. The stars appeared again, clear and bright and no longer blocked by humanity's cage. Of the 40,000 Zorvathi ships that had entered human space, only 2,000 remained. Most of those were damaged beyond repair. Their crews, nearly 3 million soldiers and officers, were now prisoners of a species they had come to enslave. Chen allowed them to send a single message home. "The war is over," the message said. "The High Archon is dead. The Imperium has fallen." When that message reached the Zorvathi throne world, it broke something that had stood for 40,000 years. The Zorvathi Imperium had ruled the galaxy through fear. Every species they conquered had believed the Imperium was invincible. Every rebellion had been crushed. Every resistance had been destroyed. The Empire was eternal. The Empire could not fall, but now it had. Word spread across the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. The humans had done the impossible. They had trapped the entire Zorvathi armada and destroyed it. They had killed the High Archon himself. The Imperium was not invincible after all. On 100 worlds, oppressed species rose up against their masters. Rebellions that had been brewing for centuries finally exploded into open warfare. Zorvathi garrisons found themselves surrounded by enemies who were no longer afraid. The Empire's remaining forces rushed from system to system, trying to put out fires that burned everywhere at once. But they were spread too thin. The armada that might have crushed these rebellions was gone, dead in human space. One by one, the subject species broke free. The Keth threw off their chains and reclaimed their ancient homeworld. The Voruni destroyed the slave camps where their children had been born for 10,000 years. The Shdar, a species that had been forced to serve as living computers, shut down the networks that controlled them and vanished into the depths of space. Within a year, the Zorvathi Imperium collapsed. What had taken 40,000 years to build fell apart in 12 months. The greatest empire the galaxy had ever known was reduced to a handful of systems, surrounded by enemies who remembered every cruelty, every humiliation, every life that had been taken, and through it all, humanity watched. They did not conquer. They did not demand tribute. They simply opened their borders to refugees, shared their technology with those who asked for it, and helped where they could. For the first time in galactic history, a powerful species had chosen to be kind. The Galactic Assembly was formed 2 years after the fall of the Imperium. Representatives from 300 species gathered on a station built in neutral space, far from any Formers or Vathi territory. They came to discuss the future, to build something new from the ashes of tyranny. Ambassador Elena Vasquez represented humanity. She was older now, her hair streaked with gray, her face lined with the weight of everything she had seen. But her eyes were still sharp, and her voice was still strong. She walked to the central platform of the assembly chamber, surrounded by beings from 100 different worlds. Some had scales, some had feathers, some had no physical form at all, existing only as patterns of light and energy. All of them watched her with something that looked like respect. Elena looked out at them and thought about how far humanity had come. 3 years ago, they had been primitives in the eyes of the galaxy, insects to be crushed. Now they stood as equals among the stars. "We have all suffered under the Imperium," she began. "We have all lost something to their pride and cruelty. Our histories were erased. Our cultures were destroyed. Our people were enslaved and killed." She paused, letting the words echo through the chamber. "But we survived, all of us, and now we have a chance to build something better, something that honors the memories of those we lost and protects those who will come after us." The assembly members listened in silence. Some nodded, some wept, some simply stared, still unable to believe that the nightmare was truly over. Humanity did not fight the Imperium to become the new masters of the galaxy. Elena continued, "We fought because we refused to kneel. We fought because freedom is not something that can be given or taken. It must be defended." She smiled slightly. "And we learned that even the most powerful empire can fall when it forgets that the universe is full of species who will never stop fighting for their right to exist." She touched a control on her wrist. A holographic display appeared above her, showing a map of the galaxy. One small section was highlighted in blue. "Earth space is now restricted," she said. "This is not a threat. It is a promise. Our system, our home, is closed to any who would come as conquerors." The Zorvathi learned this lesson. Let no one else need to learn it again. The display shifted, showing the blue zone connected to hundreds of other highlighted systems by lines of light. "But to all who come in peace, as friends, as partners, as equals, Earth space is open. We will share what we have learned. We will help you rebuild what was lost. We will stand beside you against any threat." She lowered her hand, and the display faded. "The age of empires is over," Elena said firmly. "The age of cooperation begins. Let us build it together." The assembly chamber erupted in applause. Beings who had been enemies for millennia stood side by side, united by hope instead of fear. It was not perfect. It would never be perfect, but it was a beginning. Elena walked back to her seat, her heart full of emotions she could not name. She thought of General Chen, who had retired to a small house by the ocean and spent his days watching the waves. She thought of the soldiers who had died defending their world, whose names were carved into monuments on every continent. She thought of her children and grandchildren, who would grow up in a galaxy that no longer feared the shadow of the Imperium. They had won, not just the war, but something greater. They had proven that courage and determination could overcome any odds. They had shown the galaxy that no species had to kneel, and they had ensured that Earth would never be conquered. The stars glittered outside the assembly station, ancient and eternal. They had seen empires rise and fall, species born and destroyed, wars that shook the foundations of reality. They would see much more before they finally burned out, but they would also see something new. A galaxy learning to live in peace, species helping each other instead of conquering each other. A future built on cooperation instead of domination. Humanity had helped make that possible. Not by being the strongest, not by being the most advanced, but by being stubborn enough to refuse surrender, smart enough to trap their enemies, and wise enough to show mercy when the war was won. In the end, that was what it meant to be human. Elena looked out at the stars one last time and whispered the words that would echo through history. "We do not kneel," and the universe answered with silence, as if agreeing that perhaps, just perhaps, the humans had earned their place among the stars. The galaxy was free, Earth was safe, and the future stretched out before them, full of possibilities that no one could yet imagine. This was not the end of humanity's story, that it was only the beginning.